Hope everything is going well up to this week. At least it looks like you're somewhere sunny and warm right now.
On
So,
my porch. I can't believe
what?
it. We had cold, rainy, 50-degree weather. The mountains got a foot of snow, and today it's 82. So
So I had classes last night, and they was asking me. I'm in Oklahoma, and they said, "Well, how's the weather?" And I said, "Well, Saturday it was right at a 100 degrees. We had a storm evening, so Monday early reached um, 80 degrees. Most of the state was in the upper 70s. And so it's kind of warmed up the last 2 days. We're in probably the mid 80s today, so it's sunny. So big change. Fall's coming, right?
it's
So,
coming and going and coming.
so hey, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 6 o'clock, so I'll try to get you off here at 9:30 or 10, if at all possible. So I see everybody's kind of shaking their head. Uh, no, we won't be on long tonight. So hope everything is going well up to this point in a class. I know we don't meet weekly. We usually meet when we start a new module, and so module 2 actually is starting. This is week 6, so remember this particular course is still a 16-week course, where a lot of the other ones in the program offerings have changed over to the 8-week format. So this one's a little more slow paced. So as we start module 2 for weeks 6, 7, and 8, you'll notice kind of the theme is high leverage practices. That's kind of the theme for module 2. And so as you kind of look at the module 2 tenets, it really focuses on tier 1, 2, and 3 resources. That's a lot of what it's focusing on, MTSS, RTI. So I will say a lot of states out there, if you look at the testing process that occurs, getting students determining whether they're going to qualify for special services, a lot of states now have reached over to what they call the MTSS or RTI model versus what some states use is known as a discrepancy model, meaning it's strictly formal assessments. We come in, the school psych or the psychometrist will come in. We administer formal assessments, and then we base everything off what we call a discrepancy model, looking for major discrepancies in there across the board on all the subtests. So where I'm at, Oklahoma, we are still one of the few discrepancy states, the discrepancy model state, although we've been put on notice and we have a window of time to start making that change and transitioning over. So we have 7 years to get it done. They gave us like an 8-year window for everyone to start shifting. And so at the end of that window, we've already went through 1 year. So a lot of schools are already kind of starting to shift that direction now. So it's a culture shift for everyone here in Oklahoma because we've been used to that model for so long. So it'll be interesting. But once you become familiar with the MTSS model and get used to it, it's very effective. And one reason is probably I would say that they were having a lot of students that were in districts that were over ident students. So that's one reason they've gotten away or shifting away from it. So I'm in the process of doing it. Should pop up for you. So mainly few things I want to cover. I want to look at a couple of things in the course shell, but I also want to look at the next 3 weeks. Module 2 is weeks 6, 7, and 8. So if you notice, this is week 6, September 23rd through the 29th. So really, the only thing you have due this week is the teaching reflection number 2. It's that group discussion board. So you guys have already done one previously in module 1. So this is a continuation of that. Pretty much the prompts are the same. Just going to ask you to reflect on the last few weeks and provide information in for the group that you're with. And then it has your assigned readings. We are going to look at tonight briefly the difference between accommodations and interventions. Sometimes those are used interchangeably together, but there are differences, and we're going to go over those briefly. It's not anything that's long and extensive. Then looking ahead, week 7, which will be September the 30th through October the 6th, continued readings from the assigned chapters at the beginning of Module 2. Again, talking about Tier 1, 2, and 3 resources. There's some couple websites on there that will take you to resources that show different interventions. One particular website that's noted up here is Intervention Central. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that or not. It is a great resource for you, so I encourage you to look at that during Module 2 in these next few weeks. Sunday, October the 6th, you'll have a praxis practice quiz due. So again, just that one item for week number 7, and then week number 8, ending Module 2, you'll have practice quiz number 4, and then a discussion board, all focused on the topic of evidence-based practices. So again, right now, everything's kind of a slower pace. When we start Module 3 around the middle of October, we're going to start talking about the case study student and the case study project. And we'll get into that. And that assignment will take us pretty much from week 9 all the way through week 16. There's 4 parts to that assignment. So we will go over that in detail when we meet again in a couple weeks to kind of start that process. So just wanted to share that with you briefly, let you know what's coming up the next 3 weeks. Again, this 16-week course compared to the 8 weeks is a lot slower pace. So I'm used to doing the 8-week courses, and we're just rolling from one thing to the next quickly. So I'm going to stop my over to the portion in a second here. So I've this switch over. Your screen should pop up in just a moment. So in Module 2, when you first put up, it's going to show a tab that says lecture, difference between accommodations and interventions. Can everyone still see my screen okay? Okay, see Sam shaking his head. So it talks about multi-tiered systems of support, or RTI, pretty much same concept, just different names. And each of those provide different levels of support. As I mentioned, most states now are shifting over to that type of model. Just to kind of give you an idea here, I mentioned we are not there yet, but we have, like here, our staff are really struggling with MTSS right now because they're using that model. We are one of about 12 or 13 school districts as part of a grant that provides licensed mental health care providers in every district. And so they're using an MTSS model. And so our staff across the districts, a couple selected at each side, are going through that training. And I met with our licensed mental health care provider today, and she was sharing with me how overwhelmed they are. And I kind of, chuckled a little bit and talked about where we're headed here with the testing side of it and having to implement those interventions. So again, it's going to be challenging, but once you get it down, it is very effective. So when we look at accommodations and interventions, oftentimes they're interchanged, they're used meaning the same thing in conversation, when in actuality there are some differences. So accommodations basically it means the teaching of supports needed so the student can demonstrate they've learned successfully. That's very simply put, it includes any adjustment to the learning environment or the delivery of instruction to promote learning. Okay, so basically the curriculum is not changed through the accommodation. The accommodation can include extra time. That's common in IEPs, right? We see that the student may need extra time for assignments, or they may need reduced length of assignment. So instead of a math lesson, Sam, that's got 30 questions, a student might do all the evens or the odd problems. Okay, so that is a reduced length of the assignment. They may need help with reading orally, or they may need the use of manipulatives or graphic organizers, study guides, written notes, and use of technology. Those are all examples of accommodations. It's just a way that helps them or helps the learning environment or the delivery of instruction. Now, as far as the SPED teacher, helping the general education teacher set up a classroom, um, is one way you can help. We had a conversation last night in one of my classes about, and you probably already see this, but especially with the teacher shortage, we're getting a lot of new teachers coming in that don't really maybe go through a traditional program at a university as far as teacher prep program. And so they're going through alternative certification or they're getting emergency certified. I know we're seeing a lot of that here due to the teacher shortage. So we hire those individuals and we get them in and we assume they have a basic understanding of special education and how to work with a SPED teacher and how to implement those accommodations in the classroom when in actuality they don't. Or you may be in a district where you have colleagues that are very resistant to working with you as a team member to help make sure that student is successful. So I don't know if you've encountered that yet or not, but it's not uncommon and that creates some additional challenges. So anytime you can work with and partner with a gen ed teacher, um, in any way to help them understand and also to help them implement some of those accommodations, the better off it'll be for the student. Interventions, when we look at interventions, they can happen in tier one, but they often, when we're talking about tier one, that's pretty much for the whole group. So that intervention, sometimes that's all they need. They may only need tier one where it's whole group instruction. And then when we move up to tier two or tier three, it's more focused. Tier two would be small group. And in tier three, it's going to be that one-on-one intense instruction with the student. When we look at special education interventions for tier two and three, those supports often happen either in the gen ed classroom. As I mentioned, tier two, small groups of instruction, or it could be in the special education setting. Okay, meaning they may be pulled out, Sam or Denise, and you bring them down to the resource room and you're working with some small groups. That would be considered a tier two. Or you're doing some extensive one-on-one when we get into tier three. And so they may be doing some supplemental or targeted interventions in addition to that tier one when they're in that general classroom and the whole group is receiving that. So interventions are in addition to and do not replace any type of instruction. So it's in addition to the instruction they receive. So those interventions are often supplemental and they target that student's IEP goals. Okay, and we know they all have different goals. So to intervene means to come in between. So you want to alter the course of events. So students that have high incidence disabilities, we have to intervene in order to ensure that they make the necessary gains. Okay. For their academic goals, their social goals, or any behavioral gaps that they may have. Something I'm going to comment here, talking about making sure that they have updated goals and that they're changed yearly whenever you review. In our SPED law class last night, we studied a couple court cases that came back on individual districts, and it was all centered around the IEP goals were never changed. They were using the same goals year after year. So guess what? The student was regressing parents pulled them out around fifth grade and took them to a private school where they focused on their specific weak areas and all that. And guess what? All of a sudden, those students started making progress in a rapid manner. I mean, quick. And so it's very evident. So the students, or I'm sorry, the parents came back on the district and sued the district. And they ended up winning in those cases. So it's very important. I stressed that last night with the class. You have got to update those goals. And if you set goals, Denise, in an IEP meeting, and you rock along and you quickly see that those goals are not good, they're not fit for the student, put the brakes on and do another review, but don't just let it go. And that's what got those districts in trouble. Basically, they either weren't changing them, or if they did make any type of modification in one of the court cases, it wasn't good and they just let it go. So parents got upset, pulled them out. So just kind of wanted to add that. Remember, make sure you guys update those goals each year. Interventions can be described as a set of teaching procedures. Okay, those interventions may come in packaged curriculum that's bought by the district. Okay, there are a lot of different intervention and packaged curriculum out there. Some of them that are mentioned is the Linda Mood phoneme sequencing, iStation, accelerated math. I don't know how many of you guys use accelerated math in your districts. It was really big at one time. We still use it here. They may also be explicit instructional practices you use to teach skills such as collaborative grouping, modeling, guided practice, even readers theater. So the key to that is when you are looking, or your district is, and you're working with them to seek out some of those, just big word of advice is make sure that they're evidence-based. Okay, meaning they've been researched and found to be have the potential to help with students, whether it's academic, social, or behavioral. Okay, so that's the main thing, making sure they're evidence-based. Another thing is make sure you update and change goals. Okay, don't use the same ones over and over and over. Okay, to come back and get you if the parents really push that. Any questions? That's kind of just an overview of interventions, accommodations. You want to have any questions on that?
I don't have a question. I just need a little clarification, I guess. We use RTI and MTSS. And that's what we've been doing for years out here. Um, but when we talk to our staff about it and to try to get classroom teachers to understand what tier one and when they come to the RTI process, for each student, because we do that. We have an RTI meeting every single afternoon based on grade levels to who comes and who doesn't. So um I want to just make sure I understand what you're saying. We tell them that tier one is grade level general instruction. So the kids getting tier one no matter what. Then if they need extra supports, the teacher in the classroom or an RTI interventionist is pulling them for tier two. So they're getting the instruction again twice. Then if they need IEP goals, accommodations, then they're getting tier three with a provider like us. So
Sure.
is that what you meant, or is that the same thing?
Yeah, very exactly. Yeah, you're spot on. So again, a lot of them in are you in Colorado?
Yeah,
Okay. So I can't remember if you guys, I'm assuming you are either RTI or MTSS and you're not a discrepancy model state.
we use RTI and MTSS, and that's how we determine really what leads us to evaluations for a kiddo. If the intervention's not working, it's on a 6-week base, and then after
Exactly.
6 weeks, we tweak the intervention, and yeah,
No, you're exactly right. It's pretty much the same as kind of what I was going over. So yeah.
okay.
And so the testing now basically is done to get results that should support the interventions that you've been implementing. And it
Yeah.
should also support any type of assessment, benchmarking, or informal or whatever it may be, all during the MTSS or RTI process along the way. So
Yeah.
now for us, it's going to be a flip. We're used to the testing first on the front side. So see, it's the testing now is going to support everything you've been doing.
We still use a lot of testing. There's a lot of assessment, and especially the tier two kids for sure get progress monitor once a month through that testing, just because that's where the teeter totter is right
Sure.
on. cue.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. You guys do a lot of benchmark testing along the way, you say?
yep.
Yeah. What's some of the different assessments you're using, Denise?
Well, I'm primary, so we use a lot of Hegarty and Orton Gillingham kind of stuff
Yeah.
for phonemic awareness and phonics and fluency, a lot of fluency. And then in math, we are using the iReady. We use an iReady math program, so we're using all the assessments through that.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else do frequent ongoing assessments to help
I got a
monitor?
I got a question. So, at what point, like in our district, I used to be a resource teacher, and it was always this constant battle between the school district and the cooperative. But at what point, or does it depend on the district? Like, is tier two the student gets the gen ed instruction and then comes to you in SPED and gets the instruction with you? Or, like, how
No,
does that all work?
we,
Because
yeah, go
I
ahead.
had some students, like when I was doing that, I had some students that got zero instruction from the gen ed teacher when they really needed that. And I was trying to push really hard to get them that gen ed instruction. And I got a lot of pushback from the school district that no, this is not what it was. And I was like, no, this kid needs it. So it was this constant back and forth. So I guess I don't know. It does do the special education students, do they have to be how far behind do they have to be before you pull them full time into your resource room?
Are you talking high incidence? Like, are these significant need kids?
No, they're not structured room kids. These kids are functional, they can talk, like they were completely normal. It was just I mean, it's just this constant battle in the school districts. I'm not in that district anymore, but
All of our students, no matter what, if they even are highly impacted autistic kids, they still get tier one instruction. They might be in the room with an EA support, but they still get every single student that can be in a classroom gets tier one instruction. And then after that, it's kind of like our bubble kids. It's like there's something happening, they're falling behind with tier one, they can't go to their seat and do independent work. And so those are the kids that kind of hit that bubble, like on an assessment, they might be what we call in the red or yellow. They're not green anymore. Like we really need to put some more attention on them. And then the tier two kids get intervention instruction from their classroom teacher or from maybe an EA or a para support that pushes into the classroom, but they don't get tier three special education intervention from us unless they've gone through, really it's like 12 weeks of RTI because they have to go through 6 weeks, and if the intervention doesn't work, then we go through another 6 weeks, and then if the intervention doesn't work, we say that's enough time, we need to have them evaluated for and see if there's a real learning disability.
okay. Well,
So
Yeah,
I just wanted to clarify that way I could continue supporting some of my coworkers saying, no,
yeah,
you are doing the right thing, you are pushing for the right thing. It's just, yeah,
I mean,
we have a new director which is pushing that, which I'm really, really happy about because at the time when I was in that school, we didn't have a director. So,
yeah.
but I feel bad for the person that took that position because now they're trying to fight the battle that I was fighting. And yeah, it's complicated. But I just wanted to clarify that way I could help that person out.
yeah.
We
No,
really try to use the language of, and it really honestly to our classroom teachers too, because they see a need and they panic sometimes and just think that we're going to swoop in and fix it. But we always use the language of their gen ed kids first. Every kid in the building is a gen ed kid first. And then we go from there. Maybe that will help.
Yeah, another thing too, we talked about this last night, which kind of goes along the lines, it sounds like what might have been happening here in your district. We talked about this a lot last night about
Yep.
also the goal too is least restrictive environment. So to automatically just pull those kids right from the beginning and not have them in the gen ed setting for that tier one, that's where they need to be to start off. And so you start getting into least restrictive environment as well. So that's another aspect of it you have to really look at and consider.
Well, like I said, I'm glad I'm not in that position anymore because that's what I was
Yeah.
pushing. But
Yeah.
just trying to encourage that the person that's in that position now and dealing with that same battle that I had, you are doing the right thing. You just keep doing what you're doing and stuff like that. So I just, yeah.
Well, I think in your mind, you're definitely thinking the right way, and then you're hearing Denise's experience too on what they do in her district, and it sounds like they've got their stuff together and doing a good job with that process as well. So
We're fighting the same thing right now. Danny's in this class also. I mean, when the sit team still has that mindset, the people that kind of okay and push things through, I mean, they say they understand us and we keep repeating this stuff over and over again, but we have some really, really poor sit practices going on in each building in our district. And there's an absolute, I mean, have an over identification problem and we do RTI and we have been practicing MTSS for years, but it's just people. I mean, we had a teacher go into one of our SPED teachers' rooms today and say, I need you to test this kid in math. He's already got an IEP in reading, so you need to just test this kid. And it's just been like, I mean, it's overwhelming. So I'm going to ask now if it's possible to show this video of this class to our sit team, if that is okay with you, Dr. Posey, because we are saying the same thing you all are, and it's just not being followed through. I don't know what we're saying, what we're missing, but I like the idea. They're gen ed kids first. We've got to consider that for them. That's the best thing for them. And so
Yeah. Another thing that we're not really fighting it, but we're making classroom teachers aware of it is just because a kid might show typical signs of dyslexia doesn't mean that they're a SPED kid. So we are actually having some PD around that coming up in January because there's some serious research out there that shows that the 20% of our population has dyslexia, and it's not something that you outgrow or that you can just teach out of a kid, right? So you just have to teach them strategies, and there's no way there's that many kids that have a significant learning disability. So that's another thing that we're pushing right now to just raise awareness that, first of all, we don't diagnose that, but if they have typical signs of it and you can screen for it, there's things that the classroom teachers can do for those kids that they don't have to be considered special education.
well, we're just simply trying to show that they need to prove the accommodations that they're trying in their classroom.
Right.
They're saying, oh, I'm, preferential seating. That's what I'm doing right now. Man, yes, you can write that down and I'm glad you're trying that, but what else are you doing? Well,
So we have
they're not specifying for sure.
our
one thing,
building, our building's doing a really great job of they have an assessment schedule, and I'm happy to share that with anybody that wants to see it. But they push it out, and every single grade level has an assessment schedule. There's a link on there to the assessments that you're supposed to use. The schedule has to be completed by this window. Everything is in there, and then the RTI specialist goes through and kind of highlights things, and they say, okay, what are you doing for this kid? And we really do every single day. Monday through Thursday, we meet with grade level teams for 30 minutes after school to talk about kids in that way. I mean, it's a lot, but it's worth it because then you don't have this, well, we do it this way. Well, this grade level does it this way. The whole school does it exactly the same
it
way.
needs to be consistent. Yeah, for sure, across the district, each school site. That way
Right.
you don't have different buildings doing it different ways. You want consistency.
Oh, our
One thing,
district's not consistent, but our school is.
yeah. One thing that, here, I found when I came into this particular district is they basically had an over identification problem, and they were only using, they might use star reading as a screener, and if this kid scored a little low, teacher would go down to the school site and say, "Hey, this student needs to be tested." Well, I'm paying the price for it right now because of the number of students they have identified. Where if they would have, you know, followed tier 1, 2, and 3 along the way, those students
Right.
more than likely would have never ended up in special education. I mean, just to be totally honest about it. Now we got it to where they have to show kind of similar to Denise, what she's saying, but we have a format where they have to show multiple weeks of interventions. They have to have data to back it up. They've got to have documentation before our school cycle even test. I mean, if they can't show us all that, they're like, no, you need to go back. You haven't met all the um, prerequisites before we even get to this point. It's just kind of slow that down somewhat and avoid that over identification. I go out and contract tests now still. That was my background. And if school district contracts me or have me come in, I mean, that's the first thing before I actually go down to test them, I say, I want to see all your documentation. I want to see everything you've done up to this point. I don't want to show up and ask for that, and then you hand me a star reading screener, and that's the only piece of documentation you have. I'm not going to do it. I tell them
Right.
I'm not
And
going
it
to do
can't just be the online component because your state wants a technology-based
it.
assessment. It has to be paper pencil with teacher in front of the kid.
So even
Well, and
myself
that's the
as a contractor going in, I won't do it unless they can show me weeks
What they've done.
intervention and support and steps they went through to get there. Because and I always tell them in my 805 class, the assessment class, I always tell them that the goal is to look at the overall whole picture. There's multiple factors we need to look at before we even recommend placement. What I do on the formalized testing is one piece of the puzzle. There's other factors that we need to look at, not just basing it off me coming in and giving the WJ4 in a testing session, because to me, I always tell them that's a statistical snapshot of how that child performed on that day with me
Right.
in that environment. That's not really a true reflection, maybe, of how they perform consistently day in and day out. That's just one piece of the puzzle we need to look at. So I always tell them we need to look at the whole picture before we really consider putting that kid in there, that
well,
student.
we're just even the time frame, we meet with the grade level um sit teams with the teachers, and they bring kids up and they look at their iReady scores, and 3 weeks later they want to say, see, they're not showing any growth. We just started RTI reading this week. We shouldn't even really be thinking about anything for, I mean, to me, for another 6 weeks. And then we should still be trying more interventions. And this is
Sure.
what I'm, as a team, we're trying to press everybody to do, we need to do for these kids. Because, like you said, that's just a snapshot of that day, of that,
Sure.
that test. And
Right.
we are struggling when you're looking at 25% of every grade level in a building. And that's not an exaggeration. It's 25% plus. Um,
Yeah.
it's overwhelming. It is overwhelming.
I actually heard today that they're coming out with a new Woodcock Johnson next year series, and it's
Yeah.
going to include like a post-COVID, like we have a COVID group of kids now, and the test is like focused on that sort of thing. Did you guys know that already?
Yeah, they have a new
Oh.
edition or revision of
Yeah.
that coming. Yeah,
Mhm.
you're
Which is
right.
great.
Exactly.
I wish they would have
So-
done that with a lot of other things too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Not just the testing. They should have considered a lot of things.
I agree.
Thank
Well,
you.
I think a lot of schools out there across the country probably were used to just, you know, one screener and they recommend them for testing. And I'm going to say this because it's pretty much a fact. But a lot of those teachers, well, Johnny's struggling. I want him tested because that's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, it's someone
for
else's
them.
problem. Kick the can down the
That's
road.
right. It's the easiest thing for them to
Yep.
become someone else's challenge to deal with. And so it's not doing the student any justice at all. So good discussion. Anyone else have any comment or question? Challenges you're faced with in your district when it comes to RTI or MTSS? I mean, here it is a process. We have some that, I mean, they catch on their shell and they get it, and then there's others that it's just like it doesn't register. I don't know if it's they don't want to get it or they're just totally resistant to it, but
That's what I didn't realize when I became a SPED teacher, that not everybody accommodates all kids that need it. Like I just taught, I don't know. And so it's been very eye-opening that like, yeah, it's not everybody does that. I'm like, I just thought that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to help all the kids. And it's like, no, if they're not following this, then, it's your problem. And I didn't,
Oh.
yeah. So
had a conversation with my high school principal about 2 weeks ago. I told him, I said, I've always said this for years. I may not be very popular, but I think it needs to happen. I've always said that I believe all gen ed teachers we need to schedule one day on the school calendar, and they need to change places with SPED teacher and go into that SPED room for one full day. It will be a paradigm shift for them and a major eye opener. And maybe that's what needs to happen to get some of them to understand. And but for years I've always said that. So because like Danny was saying, you get over on the special services side, and then you quickly find out who is and who is not implementing accommodations, and it's eye-opening because you thought, I would have never guessed that Mr. or Miss so-and-so down the hall would do that. So it's quite eye-opening. Any other question, comment? No, everyone's quiet tonight. Well, I'm not going to keep you long. I just wanted to, as I mentioned, touch base with you as you start module 2. It's week 6, 7, and 8. So kind of went over what you have coming up. When we get into module 3, which is going to be at the beginning of week 9, that's when we get into the case study to when this will start moving a little bit faster paced. Okay. Any questions before we go? Nope. So just know on week 9, we'll have another Zoom. It'll be on that Wednesday, and it'll be starting that module 3. Okay.
I do have a question once you're done recording.
Yeah. I will. I'll start the recording tomorrow. Yeah. I'm going to stop my screen share, and I will go ahead. Wait just a minute here.